Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Zooming Out, Unlocking Possibility Through Advancing Youth Engagement. I'm Takkeem Morgan, Senior Director of Communication at Prevent Child Abuse America, and I will be your host for today. Zooming Out is our space where we step back from the day to day and take a look at the bigger systems, narratives, and practices that are shaping child and family well-being. Today, we're turning the lens towards something foundational to prevention work, which is how we engage young people, not as symbols, but as partners. We know this is important. Over the next hour, you'll hear from practitioners, advocates, and creators who are doing this work in real practical ways. We'll talk about technology, policy, partnership, identity, agency, and the power of story. A few quick notes before we dive in. We're going to take some questions in the second half of the presentation. And so if you can drop those in the question and answer panel, we'll get to them at that time. The closed captions are on. As you heard, the session is also being recorded, and the recording will be shared out later on. And so with that, we will dive right in and meet the people who are going to make this conversation possible. Um, we are going to start with Flo White. Flo White is a dedicated advocate, speaker, community leader, committed to uplifting youth, family, and underserved communities with a background in social services and advocacy. She uses both professional experience and personal insight to inspire change, build connections, and create pathways to opportunity. Known for her authenticity and passion, Flo brings a powerful voice to conversations centered on resilience, empowerment, and healing. Welcome, Flo. Next up, we have Bobbi Taylor. My friend Bobbi Taylor is the founder and CEO of Proximate Solutions, an organization focused on strengthening support for lived experience leaders so they're equipped to partner with systems, which is critical if systems are going to change the way they need to. She is also a consultant with an extensive history in youth and parent engagement, having supported more than 45 agencies, youth councils, and organizations in building authentic, effective partnerships with those closest to the work. Grounded in both strategy and lived experience, Bobbi's work challenges systems to not just listen, but to act, because when those most impacted are meaningfully engaged, we move closer to the solutions that we want to see. Next up, welcome, Bobbi. Next up, we have Shimaine Holley. Shimaine Holley is a social worker with North Carolina Social Services and the founder of Change is Inevitable, LLC. Her work focuses on trauma-informed care, youth empowerment, and advancing systems change within child welfare and juvenile justice systems. As a national speaker and lived experience expert, Shimaine brings both professional and expertise. She brings both professional expertise and professional insight to her work, helping organizations and communities bridge the gap between policy and practice. She's passionate about creating meaningful, community-driven impact that supports young people and strengthens systems of care. Welcome, Shimaine. And finally, we have Quartez Harris. Quartez is a Cleveland-based best-selling author, poet, and has numerous accolades as a teaching artist. Harris spent many years as a second-grade teacher in the Cleveland school system and currently dedicates his time to living within books, writing, and running poetry workshops. His newest book, Go Tell It: How James Baldwin Became a Writer, which came out January 2025, is a USA Today bestseller among several other awards. Go Tell It serves as an ode to the childhood of American icon James Baldwin, an amazing man, and the power of storytelling, illustrated by Colquette and Coretta Scott King honoree Gordon C. James. Welcome, Quartez. So as we get started, what I'd like to do is go around and allow the panelists, I've given the formal introduction, but I'd like to go around and allow our panelists to introduce themselves, their work, and their perspective on this topic. Each could take about maybe 5 to 7 minutes. or as much or as few time as you need, honestly. And then we'll start with Bobbi, then we'll go to Flo, Shimaine, and we'll close out with Quartez. Bobbi?
Oh, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It is great to be back to this space. I feel like I am invited a lot, and I love being here with all. And I really want to center young people today. And I want to be really clear about what we're actually talking about when we say youth engagement. Because a lot of the time it's a phrase that really means participation. It's inviting young people to spaces that were already built, the decisions are already decided, and they're already moving work. But that's not what I'm talking about. When I talk about engagement, I talk about partnership and true power sharing, right? Who gets to shape the decisions? Who gets resourced to make those decisions? And who is actually trusted to lead the work? And the reason why that matters is because the impact is real. If youth engagement is right, outcomes change for communities and for youth. And if we don't get it right, we keep rebuilding these same solutions and these cycles and wonder why things aren't feeling different, or we're just creating another initiative that centers the same outcome that we want, but we don't really see the results. And so what's not working is, systems are still designing, and I mean prevention systems, community systems, and agency systems are still designing without young people in partnership. And that leads to programs not being utilized by youth. That leads to missing the solutions for the real problems or the root of the problems that exist. And it really delays the responses instead of focusing on prevention. And that's not a youth problem, that's a design problem that we collectively have to fix. And so when we fix that and we really get into authentic youth engagement, and when we position young people to lead and dive into leadership, decisions become more accurate. Blind spots get exposed, and proximity brings clarity, and lived experience sees what data cannot see alone. And so we stop wasting time and we stop wasting resources that go to the cycle that continues. Um, Another impact is young people are invested in real leadership that they're already navigating systems of, the problems that they're solving daily. They're just not recognized as leaders. And so when we invest in leadership development, they get recognized as leaders and they come alongside the work and help fix the problems that currently exist. And that investment kind of shifts into paid roles and leadership pathways and long-term influence that can impact our communities because they are the next generation that is going to start making those decisions. And when we invest in it now, we can be sure that we're going to have really great leaders that we believe in moving forward for the future generations. We're not creating leaders later, we're recognizing them and building them now. And when we invest in that, the other impact that we have is innovation comes with that proximity that we are building up and investing in that leadership. We get real-time insights, we get practical solutions, and we get new ways of thinking. And so it's imperative and it's essential that we invest in the leadership, so that way we can get to the solutions that, again, systems often say is not possible. The next thing that I want to talk about is the storytelling. Storytelling is often used in the wrong way, and it can be extractive. Storytelling is putting a face to a narrative or to an issue that we want collective, I want to say collective agreements upon, if that makes any sense. Where we're having this shared narrative and this shared outcome that we're really looking towards, and we're putting a face to the problem that we want to solve. But real storytelling means shaping decisions, influencing funding, and changing how problems are understood. And so when we are investing in young people and investing in their storytelling, we can make sure that young people are doing it in a safe way, but also in an impactful way that isn't just about the narrative that is already placed, but a narrative that they actually believe in and actually want to sign into. And so when stories change, decisions change, and who gets to hold the power of the stories? The young person should always be able to hold the power in that story. So again, I just want to recap, when young people are invested in their leadership and also in storytelling in safe ways, resources, prevention responses, innovative solutions, practical solutions that actually work for an entire community are possible. And I believe that is where we need to move as a collective. And I will pass it over to Flo.
Thank you, Bobbi. I heard you when you said if youth engagement is done right, outcomes change for communities. I love that. All right, Flo, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Flo White. I'm a case manager here in Washington, D.C. for an organization called Sasha Bruce Youthwork, who supports homeless youth ages 18 to 24. And today I just wanted to talk about what meaningful youth engagement means as well. I have some of the same sentiments as Bobbi does. I think she spoke beautifully. But I really wanted to talk about what meaningful youth engagement looks like versus just checking off the box of having a young person involved in your process. Youth at the table really means them actively being able to help shape programs, policies, and create spaces that they know will work for them, being the lived experts of their experiences. It doesn't mean youth just being present at the table, but it really means them being heard, valued, and acted upon. Like she said, with the resources and the funding to be able to build out what they think actionable solutions are. It requires consistent involvement and not just one-off opportunities, and it's built on trust, respect, and a shared power. Youth leadership really matters because young people understand their own experiences in ways that systems and people who haven't lived through them often don't. We have seen and data shows that solutions are more effective when youth are designed, when solutions are designed with youth in mind and also youth at the table really informing those decisions and being part of that. It builds confidence for young people, purpose, leadership, and it really makes them have a sense of proximity, I guess, to whatever it is that they are contributing to. And then when we're looking at youth engagement, a lot of organizations tend to focus on one young person or the young person that will basically go along with what they're trying to accomplish. And then we see it as tokenism. So what is tokenism versus real engagement looks like? Tokenism is more so the youth are invited, but they're not really having a say in how things are coming along or how they show up at the end. Real engagement means youth inputting their voices and really having a say in how things turn out. Some of the barriers we've seen are adults holding control and not wanting to share that power or putting names on things that youth are offering their expertise to. Lack of funding or stipends for support. We know how important it is to invest in our young people and compensate them for the time that they are spending to help you build out whatever projects you are trying to accomplish. Transportation, time, and access. We are trying to make sure that we're supporting young people, especially when they are in those spaces where they are learning how to lead, where we're giving them the tools that they need to be successful and not just expecting them to show up already fully polished. And mentorship and guidance, making sure that the skills that we're teaching youth are transferable outside of our own organization. So yes, they may be contributing to a charge that we have at our own organization, but how can they take these skills elsewhere so that they can build their own professional development and move forward after they are done in our space is super important. And then offering them financial opportunities to be able to grow and be competitive in the work field and in, just the market in general, I think is super important.
Awesome. Thank you, Flo. And I heard you when you said youth engagement means youth are heard, valued, and acted upon. And we need to be looking at the actual outcomes, not just the participation in the beginning. So thank you for that. Next up, we have Shimaine.
Hey y'all, sorry for my voice and whatnot, because I have a cold. Y'all know how the weather get when you go to like two different states. Yeah, that's what I'm going through right now. But my name is Shimaine Holley. I am from good old state of Georgia, but I currently stay in North Carolina. I am a social worker for North Carolina Social Services, and my purpose is to serve. So I love serving communities, young people, and families, and creating system change. My overview is really going to just be piggybacking off of Flo and Bobbi. You guys did amazing. Honestly, in these type of conversations, I'm really big on, I do not want to keep repeating what you guys have already heard, because we're probably going to say some of the same things. And I know that can be very redundant and boring, you know what I'm saying? And we ain't trying to do that on this call, okay? So I am going to just share a little bit of my perspective for what I feel like youth engagement is without repeating kind of what they said in a nutshell. So I was in foster care for a long time. And with me engaging with young people over the years in multiple spaces, I feel like young people are trying to make this be their identity. My feedback would be that I really want organizations and systems to recognize young people as the new leaders that they are going to be, and like bringing up the new generation. That can look very complicated when a young person has not even dealt with their own trauma and know how to share their story. That to me is where like investment comes in. Training those young people up to how to share their stories, not only to reach a goal that your organization may want, but mainly just to help them understand like, hey, you've been through this. Are you sure you want to share this? Are you sure you want to be a part of this goal that we have for like what the outcome we want to get out of? That's something that I really think that I am trying to help systems with collaboration and how that looks like, because when it comes to authentic youth engagement, not just youth engagement, but authentic youth engagement, that is where you kind of take yourself out of your position, out of your role, and become a human, have a heart. And look at young people for the skills and ownership of their traumas, as well as the skills and ownership of your current position. And trying to bridge that gap, so that when we are bringing these young people to the table to share their stories, to create a lot of innovative standpoints and data points, we are not re-traumatizing them, and we are not making it normal for them to just feel like, oh, I shared my story, I'm a part of something big, and they're really not a part of anything. They're just a part of a response that was needed, in a sense. I want to briefly touch on investment. I know you guys have heard from Flo and also Bobbi when it comes to young people being compensated. Yes, compensation is very, very, very important. But I feel like being responsive and being impactful in their lives is way more important. Tokenism is something that's really big. But when young people come to the table, the first thing I always say, introduce yourself, blase, blase. But it's more than just money. It's more than just giving them a gift card. It's really about showing up and being consistent and having like a thought process behind where these young people will be after the fact. And that doesn't have to be them working for your organization or even coming back to another event. That can look like inviting them to a newsletter so that they're getting updates via email, calling their placements if they're still in foster care, following up with them if they're not in foster care, to kind of see where they are in life, just a little check-in. Those are things that young people need that have experienced foster care, and even those that were just in care for like a day or maybe 6 months that doesn't have as much experience. I feel like meeting them where they are, because their voice matters at the table, and it actually impacts data a lot. Because they're a big population of data that's missing that we really don't know, because they just either left foster care, became homeless, a lot of other things that we just really don't know, because we don't look to them for their stories. We look for, as Flo said, those young people who kind of shine bright and say everything we need and hit everything on the head. So that's just my little standpoint from it, just so that I can give y'all some like fresh stuff. But yeah, that's it, y'all. I'm gonna pass it to who was next?
That's gonna come.
Cortez.
Thank you, Shimaine. I really appreciate your authenticity, and try not to repeat what others said. But I heard you. You said when it comes to authentic youth engagement, you got to come outside of your official role and become a human. It's about showing up and being consistent. So I'm feeling you, and that's a value add. So thank you. Next up, we have my brother Cortez. Cortez, please take the mic.
Hey y'all, so honored to be here. Thank you for the gift of your time. So I'm just, gonna just speak from the heart. So I believe that, our future is as bright or as dark as our level of care for young people. I know I tend to take a sort of modeling approach. I happen to be a writer. I'm fortunate to sort of be a artist in resident here at Cleveland School of Arts. And I always say, this is sort of my chance to sort of expand their broader view of the world, and show them that, that life is full of a rich storehouse of possibilities. one way I tend to do that is I try to think beyond myself. Like if I have an engagement, I always make sure that like I find a way to weave in young people, because I genuinely do feel like young people are the future, but they also reflect possibilities. I always say that there will be books in the future because young people are writing now. And for example, my wife, who is also an award-winning author, much better writer than I am, she had a book review. I mean a book release party of her debut collection called Run It Back, and she was asking me like, how should I sort of format the event? I said, what about young people? I have a few different young emerging writers. They will love this platform. And sure enough, it was at Visible Voice, which is a new bookstore here in Cleveland, Ohio. You haven't been, go. It's beautiful. If you're in Cleveland, Ohio, of course. And actually, it might be worth taking a flight here too. But she opened up the reading my wife's book launch, and I felt like that was also like a portal for adults. So many people. It was almost like I got to reframe like there's this sort of this narrative that young people are not reading, they're not writing, they're not interacting with literature, but this young person sort of expanded their limited beliefs. And I think oftentimes when we put young people at the forefront, we get to see with new eyes. Oftentimes we think that like what we know is all there is, and young people show us that what we think is not all there is. There's so many more ways to live in the world. There's so many ways to reimagine the world. So this is something I'm always contemplating. Even here at my job right now, it's not a job, but I'm an independent contractor, independent artist resident. I don't know what I am. They say I'm a teacher. I'm saying I think I'm guiding you, and we're guiding each other. I write in the classroom, but I'm always like next door there's going to be a poetry slam competition at Fort Hayes next door, and the winning prize is $5,000. And this is a chance for young people to see that being a writer, it can be a living vocation. It can be a career. You can make a career out of letters. And this is one way to pay you for your time at the White Page. So. And they did this last year, and they earned money. Now, granted, I'm gonna go on the stage because I am the MC. I'm like, look, Mama and Daddy, I know we all got bills, but this ain't your money. Okay, we need to affirm sort of their trajectories too, right? Even more recently, I was invited to speak do a reading at the poetry crawl through Literary Cleveland here, and thinking about young people gives you a chance to think outside of yourself. I said, I would like to include some of my students. So they read at Wonder Lantern on Lakewood, and they got to read the work. And it was their first public reading in an actual bookstore. So I think that's, a one way to sort of live in the world is to sort of ensure that we create a world that young people can inhabit, and we give them a chance to create and to reimagine a better world. So I'm always thinking about young people, because when I'm thinking about the future, I have young people to think about. And I think that's very critical when we're looking forward. We know that kids are often, they're looking further than us. And in order to go further in the future, we have to go further in our investment and care for young people. That's all.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Young people show us what we think is not all that's there. I love that. I love that right there. Thank you, Quartez. All right. So now you have a feel. Look, the show's not over. That's just the intro. But you have a feel for our panelists. And I'm sure you're probably as excited as I am to jump right into our questions. So our first question is about technology and modern engagement. In our prep call, Bobbi, this question is going to come to you. Bobbi pointed out that sometimes even the ways that we do our work, the way that we engage and manage our work, can be distant from young people. That the way that they engage and the way that they gather information and share information may be completely different than the way that that our systems typically operate. So, Bobbi, you've talked about this. What does it actually look like to meet young people where they are technologically, and where do organizations most often get this wrong?
Yeah. All right. Here we go. Always first. I'm just kidding. So there's two different things that I want to point out here. There's programming, right? Youth programming, and then there's youth engagement and leadership. So those are two totally different tracks. when we invest in leadership of youth, right, they come to the tables where we're building these programs, kind of as Flo said, they're informing programs, we're building programs, right? And those young people are probably going to say, hey, like we need to involve some social media, we need to involve short videos, we need to involve something that is fun, something that is relevant to what they are doing right now. And oftentimes organizations get that wrong because they don't see it as a possibility, or it's hard to actually conceptualize, right? But young people who are currently in programming, right, they're not wanting to read books. They're not wanting to do packets. They're not wanting to go on a computer screen for an hour and do these programs or sit in a circle and talk about things. They need a mixture of technology, which is where we are right now. If you look at public schools, if you look at just society as a whole, we are moving towards a technology era. And so I think what organizations have to kind of come to terms with is we need young people to give us insight and to partner with us to build programs that are more effective for young people, to build outcomes that are more effective for young people in the technology sense, right? Young people don't want to write, their applications out, right? How do we become more efficient with that? If I would to ask everyone to raise their hand, do you have a child, a young person, a grandkid who knows more about your phone than you do? I'm sure everyone could raise your hand, right? And so that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with keeping up with the pace of technology and keeping up in the ways that are actually going to grab young people where they are.
Awesome. And so from that answer, thank you, Bobbi. Very thorough. I want to turn to Quartez, and I want to ask Quartez, how does your work wrestle with this challenge of, modern sort of engagement? Are your young people reading primarily physical books? Or are they reading through technology mediated? Are they writing that way? I'm just curious.
I like to think I'm young, but they make me feel old. Young kids will have you reflecting within yourself, like, okay, let me reconsider my ways of thinking, because sometimes I'm a little too narrow. So I'm always pushing physical books, and I will still continue to push physical books. There's nothing like the texture of a real book, a real spine, a real physical book, right? But you know, they love the devices, and I'm looking at the devices. I call them literary devices. They can be, right? So I was just in North Carolina for an author visit and a school festival just actually a few weeks ago, actually Missouri. And I was talking to one of the persons who invited me to come here. She's got her PhD on how kids are absorbing technology.
Yeah.
And she kind of opened my eyes a little bit. She said, the thing about this sort of digital age, this digital generation, is like they know how to sort of shift, make shift. They can go from a device, they can read something, then they can check their sources through a book, they can go back to a book, they can read something in a book, and they can go rewrite, they can go, go straight to a device. And I don't know. See, I'm talking in fragments because I don't understand it, but they understand it. But I'm also considering the fact that young people sort of the landscape of the digital world is very much like how they absorb language. And I have to also consider that there's different literature is a spectrum. It's not just one medium. Like literature is some kids will learn things from TikTok, and some kids will read on their little tablets. They got these, I don't know what they're called. See, I don't even know because I'm reading the book, But also young people will also they will reference an article a lot, like I have to convince myself, because it is true, they are reading, they're reading in a very varied way. And I have to be open to that. Like, okay, so this is actually brilliant. Like kids are very sophisticated when it comes to technology. My son is 12. And he tell me things all the time, like, where you learn that at? He's always read it in an article. I read it on TikTok. I read it on Instagram. I'm like, what? What? So I think when they're thinking about literature, they're much more expansive. They're like,
Yeah.
Let me say this last part. I think when I sort of had this manufactured idea of like, this is the only way to read and crack open a book. But they're like, look at all these possibilities to access literature. Look at all these many possibilities. And you only see one. So that's something I'm open up to now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I gotta say I agree with that too. I mean, I have a 10-year-old, you know, and he's very tech forward. I'm a tech forward individual, tech forward father, and I had the same experience where, you know, we did start when he was young with books, just straight up reading books, you know, traditional. But I did introduce him to tablets and things as he got older, and he did start bringing me, I mean, big information about outer space and NASA and the, you know, and I was like, what? I was just blown away because I hadn't brought those books yet, you know, like we hadn't gotten to that chapter. He had already been there. So, you know, that kind of goes to what you said in the beginning, Cortez, where you said they're not limited by what we think. What we think is not all that there is. So Bobby Cortez.
But I do think literature, reading a book, I'm not going to undermine the value of the transformation power of reading a book, but I do think it contains your focus, right? So I do think on the screen you have access to so many different flicks and news cycles, but I think a book sort of narrows in your concentration. So I do think there is still value in sitting down with one book and devoting your attention to that.
Yeah, and my son loves reading books as well, you know. But you like you said, he's sort of ambidextrous that way, where he switches between those two. Thank you.
I just wanted,
That was a juicy one. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add one point, and that's it's important to shift so that kids have the right information, that young people have the right information, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, right? So if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it right. And that's my only addition.
No doubt.
Can
No
I
doubt.
add to that real quick? Because I just asked a student about this today. I said, "What are your thoughts about information? This informational age." And she did say what Bobby just alluded to. She said, in her exact words, she said, "The internet is polluted with misinformation." And in order for you to be able to decipher what's not credible versus what's credible, you have to have a fundamentally critical mind. And one
Yes,
way you can access that critical mind is by wrestling with language and thinking for yourself. And so I want to throw that out there. Because kids are knowledge that's the thing. Kids are not there are kids that are knowledge that this informational climate is also filled with digital pollution, which is interesting.
that's right. And there's ways to show clear examples of that to young people where you can say, hey, look, this is where the danger is. So that's why I'm teaching you this skill. That's why I'm, you know, letting you know how to research and, you know, how to actually verify these things. Because you have access to a lot of information, but you got to be able to sift through it and know what's good and what's not. Absolutely. All right. So our next topic is shared understanding and system navigation. And this one is for Shimaine. Before youth even get to the table, there's a knowledge gap about how systems and policy work. How do we close the gap without making engagement feel like homework?
Can y'all hear me? It's saying I'm muted. I'm good.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm good. Okay. Hey y'all, I'm back. So to answer the question, I feel like it's a couple different, well, two different things that I want to say. I feel like for me to not make it feel like homework and whatnot, I think whoever's bringing the young people to the table, you have to like shift your perspective. Like I'm gonna just keep piggybacking off of my little introduction that I said earlier to y'all. You have to take yourself out of like the goal sometimes to meet them where they are. A lot of times, systems are looking at young people as like, oh, like not that they're at risk or anything like that, but as if like, oh, they have such a traumatic story or they have such a bad story, and we need to hear this story so that the people that got all the money can fix it. You see what I'm saying? Like that's kind of everybody's mindset. Not everybody. Not, I'm not gonna say everybody, but majority of the people that's doing this system work, that's like the big dogs. You know what I'm saying? They look
Yeah.
at it like that. So I feel like looking at it in a sense from like a potential. Like this young person or young people are potentials to help us recognize issues or hurdles that could be deficient, you know what I'm saying, or that could make data not look so accurate. You know what I'm saying? I feel like it'll make you think more of this young person has power to be in leadership, not necessarily like a performance. Because when young people are sharing their story, you as the audience are being affected by that. in some sort of way, it is impacting you. Is whether it's making you sad, it's making you happy, it's making you, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like whenever you are engaging with young people, thinking of what happened to you when you were younger that you didn't like, you know what I'm saying? And now you got to talk about it. Are you talking about it in a way that you like making your mama look like she just horrible? Or you talking about it making it seem like, well, I did do that. My mama did that, but she's still a good mama. You know what I'm saying? How would that impact the actual goal without making it feel like you got to talk to this person about X, Y, and Z just for you to share your story? It's just so many components that goes into that. The point that I'm making is I would like to see systems and organizations shift from making it so difficult to engage young people. It's not that difficult. I think whenever you are driving the force with influence, when you're driving the influence with, oh, I want that outcome, when you're driving the influence of, well, data says this, so let's see if that's really the case, you're not thinking of that young person. You're thinking of that young person as at risk, as a performance. We can utilize that. So it makes it more difficult for you to recognize the resilience there, the leadership there, the lived experience there, the how can we manage this? Is this something that we can use for a long time? Or is this something that we can use and it can also impact us and that young person for future preferences or performances or whatever the case may be? So I think for me, that's how I look at it. So it doesn't feel like homework because the work that we do, just to be clear to everybody on the call, the work that you do right now, if it is not your why, if it is not your purpose, you're in the wrong field because nobody ever get paid enough for what we do, the work that we fight for, the young people and families that we impact and influence. So when you are trying to bring young people to the table to share their stories or just to show up, just them sitting there is a story by itself because they've already beat the stats. They have already beat it. You see what I'm saying? So they don't really have to say much, if we're being honest. So I feel like you really have to just shift your perspective when it comes to how are you looking at these young people when you're bringing them to the table? Are you looking at them in shock? Because you're like, oh my God, I have never met a young person that made it out and they're so successful. How did you get there? You know, how did you get here? So it's a lot. Looking at them as, like I said, leaders, recognizing them for their leadership, what they've conquered. Not only this, not their story. We're not talking about their story, where they are now.
The greater context, for sure. And I want to shift to shift the question to Bobbi. I know that you've done some work with trying to help systems bring young people in from an education standpoint, helping them understand how policy works, how policy moves through a system, or how rules change and things like that. What have you seen that's worked in terms of how to close that gap? And like I said, not make it seem like it's a homework assignment.
I think it depends on the project, to be honest, right? When we have advisory youth councils, like those advisory youth councils are cultivating the issues that they want to bring up and see systems start advancing and changing. And then there are like what I call special projects where it's like, hey, we want to fix the sibling separation that is happening in systems. And from that point, right, I think it's incredibly important for young people or a parent or anybody else you engage to understand the history behind what led to that outcome, because we can't continue to do the same things over and over without understanding what is currently there. For example, a young person might say, you know what, if they just gave us free Uber rides back and forth to our different foster home placements, then me and my siblings wouldn't feel the separation as much. And then on the system side, right, we know that this policy and this funding and this thing they're locked, right? They're not flexible enough to pay for Uber rides. They're not flexible enough to do these different things. And so we have to bring those young people into that history, into understanding the system and policy, so that way they're not coming up with solutions that are a no-brainer to them and feeling defeated at the table in partnership with people, right? There's a real strong want to partner with lived experience, but when we don't bring them back into some of the critical pieces that brought us here in the first place, it's going to be a mismatch. So what we do at Proximate Solution, I told you guys I wasn't going to talk about it, but we do a couple of different curriculums that help people understand the history of child welfare, all the way back from the orphan train. Shimaine's been there, but all the way back from the orphan train to present day, right? We do help people understand what levers of systems change there are and how lived experience can influence each lever. And then we do have like individual leadership development, right, for lived experience, so they understand like, hey, it's a give and take, right? Systems are constrained in their partnership abilities, and like we as lived experience have to meet them halfway too. And how do we do that effectively without kind of getting burnt out? So that's what I've seen. And when we give people that information, the possibilities become endless after that. Well, what if we did this? Or what if we utilize city funds? Or what if we use general funds that come from the capital, right? Like when they start understanding resource flows and people they can talk to and philanthropy and all these different things, that Uber ride becomes less of a barrier from a system standpoint. And it's like, hey, this is actually the thing that we need to, like, what other options do we have to make that happen? So sibling separation isn't a thing.
Thank you, Bobbi. Appreciate it. Next, I'm going to turn to the topic of systems and structures. What policies or advisory structures make youth voice durable rather than one-off? And several of you have talked about this, about how it's important with youth engagement that it's not, that it's not just for the moment, that we're thinking about the long-term opportunities for these young people. When we think about policy and advisory structures, how do we make them durable? How do we make those durable for the youth? And I'll throw that over to Flo. I know we've talked about this in the prep for this. How do you make that participation durable?
Yes. Well, number one, I think is the no-brainer: compensation. I think young people should definitely be compensated for their time. And I know compensation can be limited, just with everything going on and within our organizations. But anything that you can pull together to fund young people for their ideas and their expertise that they're bringing to the table is super, super important. And then I also think partnership is the big word. Whenever we're talking about authentically engaging young people, how do we partner? Not only how do we get them to help us accomplish our own goals, but what are you guys interested in seeing? What ideas do you have to bring to the table that you would like to see through or bring to life? And how can we support you guys in that? I know for our youth advisory board for Sasha Bruce, we have a yearly meeting with the CEO, with the team, development team, and everything, and they say what their strategic plan is for the year and what things that they're trying to accomplish, what things are at threat for our organization when it comes down to funding, and then it switches to us, and the young people get to lead the conversation about what ideas we have, what we see within our programs that we would like to be fixed or we would like to change or bring to life. And they support us in those. So it's an even exchange. So young people are never having that feeling of burnout and that I'm just giving, and I'm not seeing the outcomes or the impact of everything that I'm contributing to. I think when you really let young people have a seat at the table to share their ideas and what they want to see and how they want to see things improve, you'll have a better response when it comes to longevity, and not those like one-offs where it's just like, okay, we had a young person at the table while we went along with the plan that you were probably going to do anyway. And then also being open to differing ideas and them not being, in agreement with whatever your plan is, and how can we really take their opinions and see how we can shift versus just shutting them down, I think is important.
Absolutely. And along those lines, it's I think I've heard this a lot where, sometimes when we engage with youth, they become the youth voice, right? Their identity becomes the youth voice identity. And some young people are fine with that, but some young people feel constrained by that, like, they got to make a very long-term commitment to be this kind of youth voice. How do we engage without flattening their identity to just this kind of role that they play or this contribution that they're making? And this is for everyone on the panel. How do we engage with?
And I can start.
Yeah, sure. Go right ahead.
But speaking to my own experience as a young person who came through the homeless system, through Sasha Bruce, the organization I'm still working for, this is something that we've had to work through in real time with my organization. You know, I started off as a youth voice, but I'm 27 now. I'm not the young person that you guys might want to have at the forefront anymore. But they have helped me to create a system where not one young person is always being at the forefront and having that tokenism feeling of just like, okay, she's made it, she's successful, she's working for our organization, she's checked all of our boxes, let's put her at the front. But how do we really create a pathway for young people to come through, gain skills that is transferable to other organizations, to other fields of work, you know what I'm saying? So that they're really taking away something that will build them up to be competitive in any market. So we are starting to develop a structure where it's, you know, like a time limit of that youth voice. And then we have to move into, now it's not youth expertise, I'm young adult expertise or whatever the case, or however you want to put it. And kind of like taking, it's not just lived experience. At this point, I've done enough research, I've been in enough spaces to say that I really feel like it's just expertise. And yes, some of it has been supported and developed through my lived experience, but also through the time and the work that I have put in. So changing the language, being intentional, checking in with young people. I really like what Bobbi said about having to step out of work and step into humanity, and not looking at young people as victims or as, you know, sympathetic stories or whatever the case may be, but as young people who are the leaders of tomorrow, you know, and how you would respect your coworker is how you would respect a young person and offer them that same communication. So really checking in with them, or how are you feeling? What are your goals for the next year? And how can I support you in that? What titles are you comfortable with? What, you know, and just really moving as they move and supporting them.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Other ideas?
Sorry, Takkeem, can you? I love what you said. What was your question?
Oh, no. So I said, how do we engage with young people around youth participation as a young person, as a youth voice without flattening their identity to that youth voice?
Flo said that.
Yeah. She really hit it on the head. Truthfully, you hit it on the head. Good job.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Okay, I'm going to turn my questions to Brother Cortez. So, talk to us about the role of literature, reading, writing, and shifting how young people see themselves and how organizations should think about narrative as a prevention tool. So, talk to us about the role of literature.
All right, how much time I got? I'm joking. So I should first mention that I let some of my young students read some of these questions. And one of my students said to me that, you know, literature, books, it builds a sense of empathy. And with empathy, we can kind of sort of build towards the world we all want. And I should add to that, when I think about literature, I think, first, I think it's important that young people see our investment in literature and see how it transforms us. For me, I'm always telling young people, I don't know what I think until I read, period. Also, it's a way of understanding the human experience. It's a way of
Mhm.
living in the world. For me, it's also just a way of not just sort of living in the world, but also having, thinking about like what's happening to me, what's happening in my conscience. I remember, for me, it takes a while for me to understand something, and I read somewhere that a poet said that, my mind is slow to understand things, but if you look hard enough, it you'll learn that it will speak to you. So now I'm like, wow, and I had to wrestle with that. I'm like, oh, so anytime, I devote my attention, my mind, my spirit, my heart, if I just stick with it, something will be revealed, right? So I always, I just tell young people, like, I move through the world and there's this thing that I may not be aware of. And I pick up a book and I realize like, oh, wow, like conceptually, I have this understanding that there's a whole world happened beyond me, and also it helps me to understand like why things matter, why civil rights matter, why life matters. I read a story by it's called The Sea of Lemon Trees. It's a historical verse novel by a woman named Maria Dolores, and she talks about the lemon grove incident, which I had no idea this exists, you know, and I knew about Brown versus Board of Education, but I did not know that, you know, 2 decades before Brown versus Board of Education in California, Mexican Americans were sort of barred from their schools and put in these as this barn I was retrofitted for like lower class schooling because there was this sort of rhetoric going around that this anti Mexican immigrant rhetoric going around, and it was, and the reason why this history it matters and it's important is because it was like the first. So they won the case. Community, they came together and they won the case, and this was like the first sort of case where it sort of opposed school segregation, and they won. And this was a young kid. I was a plaintiff, right? So now I have a sort of a historical understanding about the world, and now I don't. I'm now I get to think about like why certain events and certain movements matter to me. You know, you only so many things experience can live in my head, and I only know so much. And I think another thing about reading for me, and I tell young people is like you realize that it's okay that you know you recognize you don't know everything. You don't know everything, and there's actually harm that's done when you think you know everything. And reading humbles you, you know. So it also evokes kids' curiosity. And last but not least, I would say it's just a great conversation starter. I'm able to. I tell young people, it teaches you how to choose your words, you know, and it teaches you how to have a conversation and relate to someone who you think is so unlike you, you know. So I'm always just trying to beyond sort of like, and that's a whole nother stuff. And I'm talking to writers beyond like learning how to write the craft of writing. I think about the craft of living, and that can be discovered in literature. And I always amplify literature because I'm like, this is one way that I can understand you, and this is one way you can understand me.
Yeah, man. You're like a walking, yeah, I was about to say you're like a walking poet, but you're actually a walking poet.
But I will say I didn't know the connective tissue between my lived experience and what was happening in books, and someone told me to read. And it was books where I realized like what's happened to me is happening all over the world, you know. Let me be very clear. Yeah, I'm a literary person, but I had a learning disability in reading and writing. You know, I was in special ed classes. You know, like now, you know, someone told my mom during an IEP meeting that I would never be able to function on my own. So I function at best through language. But I tell young people like people tell you to focus on what you think you're good at. That's cool and that's true. Why would you ignore what you don't, what you feel like you believe you're good at? But also focus on what you don't think you're good at, and that might you might become it might bring out the very best in you too. So I'm always trying to connect with young people who don't identify as literary kids. But I'm like, I came to reading and writing when I was in college, so it's not too late, and I'm still learning how to write because it's still hard.
That's what's up, man. That's what's up. I appreciate that. I'm glad I asked you that question too. That's what's up. Okay, so we're coming to a close of the formal question. So I have one lightning round question that I want to ask all the panelists to respond to, and then we're going to open up for the question and answer section of our presentation. So my question to all the panelists is, what is one concrete action or what should every organization listening to this week engage in and do better with youth? Hold on, let me say that question again. One concrete action that every organization listening today should do in order to engage youth more authentically going forward.
I'll go first. It depends on the context. If it's an advisory board, right? Like make sure your structures are great. If it's investing in leadership, go to your leadership and have a conversation with them about what does it mean to, yes, financially compensate lived experience partners, but also provide them professional development opportunities that enhance the way that they can impact our work.
Thank you. Flo?
Be open. As we know, our world is changing rapidly, and the people that are navigating it the most authentically and with the most curiosity and I'm looking for a word, it's not there, but are the young people that we're serving. So really just be open to bringing them into that partnership and them really meaningfully being engaged within your work.
Thank you. I think fearlessly is what the word that you were thinking about.
That was
All
a
right,
great one.
Shimaine, what's one concrete action folks that are listening can do this week to engage youth more authentically?
I'm gonna say be your authentic self, just like me, Never be afraid to be who you are in all spaces. And I'm gonna say, whenever you are trying to invite young people to the table this week, just making sure that you're asking yourself, like, what power do young people have in this conversation? Where do they really create impact in this discussion or goal that you have? So you're making sure that you're coming, with your heart and not just with the role of your business.
Thank you, Shimaine. And Brother Quartez, can you close this out? What's one concrete action folks listening on this call can take to authentically engage young people?
I think just consider that we were all once youth. We all have early experiences, and there is a child that still dwells in us, So I think, hold on to your curiosity, hold on to your wonder, ask questions, listen to kids, just ask them a series of questions, and also sort of pair that with your early experiences and see how much they've changed and how they're similar, And I think I had a student today. She said, oftentimes I feel like adults, they get to a certain age where they they don't see us as people, and they were children too. So, go back, revisit your early years, reflect on that, journal about it, think about it, and watch how that sort of affects how you interact with young people.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to open up our audience questions. We have some questions in the queue. I can't actually see the queue. I need my support staff to help me. Kirsten, is there questions in the queue?
I have not seen any questions, no, but welcome anyone to add anything in.
Awesome. Now's your time to ask your questions. And if you don't ask a question, I do have one or two more questions to ask. The first question I want to ask to all audience members is, where do you see where have you seen this done right? Where have you seen youth engagement done well? Can you give us an example of maybe either an actual engagement program, something that you see that was inspiring and done right that we can learn from?
Well, I'll speak to my own organization. I love everything that Sasha Bruce Youthwork is about and stands for. They have been a lifeline for me in my own experience, and they are making all the right steps to do that for the young people that touch their programs. And I think they're very intentional about including youth voice in every part of program development, program evaluation, marketing, everything that you can think of. There are young people involved in that process, from every event that we throw to the decorations that go in our transitional housing programs, to how program evaluations are done. There's always a young person present when they're asking other young people to express the things that are going well and wrong within their programs. We have young people involved in policy that go to Capitol Hill to talk about their experiences and what they think needs to change in policies so that these programs can really support the needs of young people that are experiencing homelessness. I really think that, and also just the access that the young people have to the higher ups. I can call my CEO personally. Young people have our numbers to development to be able to share thoughts and emails to be able to get across how they feel. We have a very strong grievance program for young people to be able to utilize to say what they feel like is not going right in our programs or where they need support. I think that is super important. So really just making sure that young people are involved in every single part of the process and really trusting that young people will build the skill to be able to do what you need them to do. So it's like, oh, how do we make policy not so boring? There's nothing boring about policy when it's affecting your life firsthand. So a lot of young people, a lot of young people will step up to the plate if they're given the opportunity. They might not know all of the fancy words or how to express themselves, but that's where a little bit of training and a little bit of humanity, like Bobbi said, comes in. I can take you on a phone call to talk about how to share your story in an authentic way. One thing that works for me is always having an axe at the end of it. If I'm going to put my life on a platform to tell you my experiences and what I'm going through, I'm going to have an axe at the end of it. So I'm here today to tell you my experience, to ask for more funding for this or funding for Uber so that, the reunification rate can be higher. And then making sure that we are keeping young people informed, because of your advocacy, here are the outcomes, or this might not have worked out this way, but here's how we can show up to do more. And what are you thinking and how are you feeling? So yeah, I think that is super important. I love to give my organization their credits, and they let young people be real and give it to them real and authentic, and they're not scared or shy away from okay, this young person is rocking the boat. I don't know if they're the right one anymore. They embrace that, and I think that's super important. And we have learned and grown over the few years that we have started this charge. So I'm always in awe and impressed by their growth. And yes.
Thank you. Thank you for calling out your organization, Flo, because in the prep I did check you guys out, and I felt the same way. I was like, man, these guys really know what they're doing. The marketing is off the chain. So kudos. Others, what are some other examples of this being done right? Shimaine, what have you seen?
I would say I've seen it in a lot of areas, so I'm just gonna I use this one organization in Georgia because I love Georgia. I would say MAC, Multi-Agency Alliance for Children. They are an agency that helps young people that's in foster care, ages 8 all the way to 21, and whatnot. And I would say that I like that agency. They per se did not help me when I was in foster care, but a program in MAC helped me when I was in foster care when I turned 16 all the way until I'm grown, okay? We ain't finna disclose my age. I can say that I like the organization. It's called Georgia Empowerment. I like the program, sorry, in the organization. It makes sure that young people's voice is heard when it comes to um, Opportunity Passport, ETV, any type of state conferences, engaging in that professional development as well. I love how empowerment taught young people how to dress up, get in your suit, learn how to talk, not be too loud, don't cuss when you're talking. I definitely enjoy watching young people grow up in a healthy way. They weren't told when they were, you know, 13, stop acting like a child. Stop acting like a child. You know what I'm saying? They is a kid. You know what I'm saying? They need to be acting like that. But helping them transition, you know what I'm saying, as they get older, just meeting them where they are, allowing them to be kids when they were kids, and as they got older, kind of holding them accountable in a different viewpoint because they are getting close to, going to college or getting in the real world. I really, really enjoy that because that's what did to me. They made it safe for me to feel like I can grow up, even though the program made it safe for me whenever they had those monthly events, foster care did not. So it was always a struggle for me, and Mac always tried to give that balance. Even though it was very difficult, they did a great job. So I definitely would like to highlight that. I like that a lot.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Shout out to Matt. Uh, Cortez, what have you seen? Well, I mean, you obviously have an example. You got a plethora of examples, but is there one that you haven't mentioned yet that you'd like to share with us?
Oh yeah. One thing that this generation is really up against climate change. And I have a student here, and she, how she spend her lunchtime, she's composting. She makes sure she gets everybody, like she says, a lot of kids, for whatever reason, don't eat their vegetables. But she'll compost it. And she said, she's like, I'm throwing in like dry matter. I'm like, what is dry matter? She said, grass, shredded cardboard. I'm doing this. And she said, we actually have a nice composting pile in the backyard of the school. You want to see it? I'm like, no, I got a panel. And she's talking about how like it's compressing well. I'm like, what does that mean? She said, that means, the worms are coming out and and it's actually deepening into soil. And I'm like, what is happening? He's like, it's stopping greenhouse gases. And I'm like, yo, are we going back a time before fossil fuels? Like, this is crazy. But I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about this young person who cares this much about the atmosphere, the air we breathe, the climate we are inhabiting. And it's like this person is not just thinking about their own sort of reaction to climate change. They're thinking about like how this could affect her classmates, how this could affect her teachers, how this could affect her friends outside of school and in school. So I'm like, oh, you getting it right, you getting it right. So I definitely want to underscore that, but I also want to mention this, but I did not say this, and I want to say this real quick. We're also getting it right. Next door there's a teacher here, and I love how she there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of real information, but there is a sense that like kids are not reading enough. But I feel like even when I believe that, I'm confronted with how limited that narrative is because they're always interacting with books, and I'm thinking to myself like, wait, kids are really out here inhabiting stores, they're inhabiting books. And I have a student here, and my dear friend, she was a writer, her name is Echo Brown, she passed away from lupus, and she wrote a book called Unlimited, Black Girl Unlimited. And I noticed that like she just been having some moods, and I just was like, you should consider reading this. And every day she comes in the classroom, she's just like, I'm on chapter 13, I'm on chapter 14, and then I asked her like, are you do you feel like it's a mirror? Are you seeing your own experience being reflected back on you? She said, yeah. And it made me think about what Maya Angelou said. She said, if I was a young person trying to make sense of myself in this world, I will read again the same way I did as a child. And I'm like, there are young people who are really trying to make sense of themselves, and they're choosing literature to do that. And I think that's one of the most transformational ways. So if you hear people saying kids ain't reading, they might be reading. They read on their phone, and they also read it in the books. And that just makes me feel so good because it's like, wow, they're thinking about the world, and that means they have themselves to think about too.
Thank you.
And one more thing, I want to shout out the panelists, yo. Like, I'm learning so much. I'm saying like this is an all-star lineup. I shouldn't say nothing. So if I took over any space, I apologize. I feel like I had to say something, but I ain't had to say nothing. Bobbi, all y'all.
No, I think all of y'all did. Whoever's responsible for pulling this together, y'all did a fantastic job. This was these panelists are amazing. All of y'all were amazing.
Let's do this again.
So as you can see, we could probably go on for another hour. I did have some other questions that I was going to pull out, but we are coming to a close for our allotted time this time. What I would like to say is a huge thank you, first of all, to Shimaine, Bobbi, Flo, and Quartez for the time. I think you guys reminded us that young people aren't a constituent to be consulted or just a token, that they are collaborators, they're leaders, they're storytellers, and engagement isn't just a checkbox, that it's a practice, and it requires that, us, the adults, everyone that's on this call, the institutions, the funders, that we do our part to prepare before we even pull up a chair and talk to a young person. I appreciate the insight from all the panelists, and I'm more informed as a result of your insight as well. And so thank you to everyone that joined the call to listen in. Please keep an ear out for our next Zooming Out series. We're gonna share that with you shortly. And as I said, this session here is recorded, and the recording will be shared out as well. So one final thank you to the panelists, and we're going to close out. So thank you.
Thank you.